Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome back. It's been a while, but as you can see, Tyrina is joining me in the hot seat for Maximize Monday. Welcome back, Tyrina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It has been a few months, right?
So good. You've been busy, so it's hard to hammer down, which is a good thing. And never
Yeah,
complain about being too busy, right? Especially with the job landscape the way it is. But I'm
absolutely.
thankful to have you on here. We've done one of these in the past in terms of our Maximize Monday focused on a mock interview. So last time we were a little bit more focused on ed tech and sales types approaches, and a lot of people told us the benefits that they saw out of that. So we wanted to do another one of these, still assisting with transitioning educators since that's kind of your forte, and I came from the
Yes.
industry, and so have a finger on the pulse of what's popular in terms of where we're going to transfer to, and instructional design, learning development are kind of those other hot topics or hot jobs right now for transitioning educators. So this time through, going to do some of the mock questions and answers that you might see and expect in an interview that's focusing on learning development, instructional design to give anyone watching, listening some insight in terms of how you can best prepare and highlight your experience from the classroom and how that's going to translate over. More so to just get everyone comfortable because interviews can be overwhelming. I mean, I do them every day, and I'm sure if I was on the other side, I would probably still hit some nerves too. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
the more you can do to prepare, the better. And so we're here to help if we can do that. So like last time, I will be playing the role of interviewer. Tyrina will be the interviewee. We're not going to go like too in depth of like tell me about your job history, stuff like that, because that's
Right.
stuff
Yeah.
that you can self. We're not going to be able to help you there too much, but we're going to give you some insight in terms of how you can answer the question. So going to jump
Absolutely.
into it. And then, of course, if you have any questions after watching, listening, feel free to send them to either of us, and we'll be more than happy to answer and respond.
Absolutely.
So, starting off, first question you can kind of expect is going to go over that experience that you have. So, while we're not going to be specific in what's your experience, Tyrina, can you point to this? In terms of giving examples, can you describe your process when it comes to designing, developing a new training program? And pull from experiences from the classroom and give me some insight in terms of how you go about beginning and getting to the end stages of implementing in that design.
Absolutely. So, my process for designing new programs usually begins with taking a thorough assessment of what are the needs of the program. I honestly like to stick with that process of doing, and I don't know if you remember this, Matt, depending on what type of teacher you were, but in English class or ELA, which is mostly my background, we do something called webbing and mapping. So you can just map out your thoughts. And so even when I learned that in school, it stuck with me through college and to my adult years into teaching my own classroom. So anyway, I like to do a needs assessment and just like do some kind of like brainstorming on what I would talk about based on what is needed for the program and what's the goal. You need to identify the goals. You need to figure out what the requirements are for the program. So I talk with a lot of stakeholders and decision makers to understand what the specific outcome needs to be and what the target audience is as far as their characteristics. And then after that, I develop a detailed plan that includes objectives, like the content outline, which is super important, and then the assessment methods. What I also do is I use a mix of instructional design models, such as ADDIE. ADDIE model is a super important method to understand in instructional design and designing programs or modules. So I use that to structure the development process. And then throughout that development phase, I integrate various learning technologies and ensure that the content is super engaging and interactive.
Mhm.
Because just like with children, you have to create things that are engaging, and adults are that way as well, especially nowadays with the type of adults that we are. We like quick information. We get sidetracked and lose focus quick because everything is so instant. Like when you watch TikTok or anything on social media. So I like to think about that when it comes to, training adults. You want to make sure that everything is engaging. You're using maybe screenshots or pictures or videos, um, as well as like asking questions maybe throughout the training as well. But again, that beginning process is super important to make sure that you understand who your target audience is and what the common goal is. I also conduct pilot tests as well to gather feedback. We do surveys to refine the program before we fully push it out and implement it.
Okay. Now, to build off of that a little bit and catering to your audience, how do you go about ensuring that the materials that you're developing, designing are going to be able to meet the needs of diverse learners? Because everyone retains information differently. And, from your time in your classroom, sometimes those lessons just click. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's the blank stares from some people.
Yes, all
How
the time.
how do you go about then, when you're going through that, making sure that there's ways that you can incorporate different learning styles into that?
Yeah, and so it's super important to have a diverse background. You work with different children or different adults so they can bring those different perspectives. So you have to make sure that you provide like multiple means of representation, engagement, expression. For instance, I've integrated multimedia resources, and interactive activities, also, which is super important, diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging.
Absolutely.
So you want to make sure that you incorporate culturally relevant examples to make the content accessible and engaging for all students.
Mhm.
Um, Additionally, I regularly collect and analyze feedback from those learners and instructors as well, just to make those necessary adjustments. In one of my roles in my previous experience, I tailored a Common Core assessment with manipulatives for students below grade level.
Okay.
So I wanted to ensure inclusivity and personalize, the materials so that regardless of who's in the program, it still hit, the children or adults where they need to be.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, can you give me some examples of times that you were able to take some of the feedback that you got from the different learners or instructors and kind of cater that into your design process as well?
Yeah. So in my previous experience, I conducted a workshop and I also did one-on-one sessions with 11th and 12th graders. It was very interesting. Those students and children who are almost adults, they can be something else, but it actually went really well. So what was involved is I was helping them craft like resumes and cover letters, which is, super interesting. And then after we did the workshops and the sessions, I collected feedback from them to understand like what their challenges and preferences were, because some students knew how to do certain aspects of a resume and cover letter, and some didn't.
Yeah.
So based on the feedback that I got, I refined the curriculum to include, again, more interactive elements and real life examples. I feel like the real life examples really went over like extremely well. It's one thing to make like, hypotheticals, but as I got to know the students, I was able to really incorporate real life examples, like maybe asking them, what do their parents do for a living?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make a pretend resume for your mom or your
Mhm.
dad.
Yeah.
But it significantly improved the engagement and outcomes because we were talking about something that was relatable to them.
Mhm.
Um, the process of gathering and incorporating feedback, it ensured that the instructional materials that I used were effective and it met the learner's needs.
Perfect. Perfect. So you kind of touched on this already a little bit in terms of some of the different e-learning tools and technology, but that's so important to implement when you're talking about design process. Like you said, when people want information quickly and they want it now, and
Yeah.
there's so many tools at your disposal to kind of assist with that. So how do you go about incorporating that? Give me some examples of some projects where you found an e-learning tool or a piece, some software that kind of assisted with that overall?
Yeah. So in one of my previous roles, I developed like a self-paced e-learning program for my math students. And we used Pear Deck, and the main two tools that we used were Pear Deck and Google Classroom, which I absolutely love. I feel like those two, even with talking with other educators, and how they, conducted their classroom and, the things that they developed, they loved Pear Deck and Google Classroom. And I've actually trained other teachers on using these tools as well. But the program allows students to learn at their own pace. And I think a lot of times with technology, even though this generation is really good at picking up things quickly, you can't assume that every child is going to pick it up as fast as the next.
Yeah.
So I feel like what was really special about this program is because it was self-paced.
Mhm.
And it also provided the teachers data, to inform the instruction. So I also integrated, again, like interactive web-based activities like Prodigy and Edpuzzle. Have you heard of Edpuzzle?
Oh, yeah.
To enhance like the comprehension and the engagement. I feel like a major part of anything that teachers develop, you have to make sure that you are developing, if you're developing a program, if you are teaching something, that comprehension piece is really what's super important.
Mhm.
And, at the beginning of the year, you're, testing your students, seeing who at what level. So by the time that I did this program, I knew what levels all of my students were. And
Mhm.
I was able to make sure that regardless of how the program was explained, everyone understood, what was needed in the self-paced program. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, awesome. And that's actually a perfect segue to the next question because we've kind of talked about incorporating feedback and things like
Yeah.
that. So beyond receiving that feedback, what are some of the other ways that you measure the effectiveness of the designs that you're trying to implement? Can you kind of give me an example of times where you just had to make a complete change just because it wasn't connecting the way you wanted it to, or you just found a better way to improve upon, what you were trying to convey to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of testing has to be done throughout the year. I mean, I've had instances where I've done something at the beginning of the school year and the kids just weren't ready yet. Like with the testing that we did, and you may have had those experience too yourself, Matt. Like it's your students have to be ready.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is again do various methods of like pre and post assessments, speaking with the learners. We also do like a performance data analysis. Like I feel like that helps out a lot too. Like for example, at one of the schools I was at, I noticed that the initial training materials, it didn't yield the desired improvement that we were looking for. So we kind of had to go back to the drawing board. I met with the other teachers and we just kind of figured out a different way to do this and what time frame we wanted to do it, because it had to be done within the year,
Sure.
so within the school year. But I feel like getting that feedback from educators on what they did in their classroom and then us looking at all of the students' data, it really helped us to identify like what were the gaps in the content and where were the gaps in like how we were delivering it.
Right.
um, and then I just revised the materials to include, again, more hands-on activities. And we were finding that as they were doing more hands-on things, it clicked. It clicked a lot better for them,
Yeah.
which led to a pretty significant improvement in the trainings that we did or the lessons that we brought forth.
Mhm. Okay. Now, there's going to be a lot of times where there's going to be the need to work collaboratively with other members, other subject matter experts in terms of pulling in material for projects and getting the information that needs to be conveyed. So, working in education, it's kind of that mix of there is a lot of collaborative approaches, but there's also a lot of independent design too. So, can you give me some examples of past collaborations, how you were able to kind of ensure that all the moving parts that were coming into one project were able to be conveyed effectively?
Yeah. So That's actually a really great question because my current role, I'm a special education teacher, and collaboration is like super key. Like it's a major part of my role. For example, something that I've done in the past, which required a lot of collaboration. I coordinated the IEP meetings,
Okay.
and I had to collaborate with the families and the service providers. Like, there's just a lot of moving parts when you are trying to get resources or get special education students, into certain programs.
Mhm.
So what I did was I ensured that the collaboration was effective to the point where we knew we had clear communication. So we figured out, okay, the best way for us to communicate is we have like a shared folder, a shared document, so
Mhm.
that everyone can see real life what's going on with a certain student.
Right.
And then everyone put in, okay, what is their goal for this student? Or what do you think they need the most? And then we just regularly reviewed the progress and met, weekly. Additionally, I worked really close with teachers and even experts outside of the original group that we were working with, like the experts, to design and implement some STEM activities
Okay.
as well. Yeah. So it actually resulted in students winning awards at the end of the program. Like we, had a whole award ceremony. It was really cool. But I mean, I feel like even outside of special education, collaboration is super important, whether you're working on a goal for adults or children. Like it's super important. And mainly I feel like that first initial meeting, everyone needs to express what their goal is at the end of this program,
Sure.
because everyone can be on all different pages,
Yeah.
if you don't establish what the goal is. So, again, most of my roles, but mainly in this most current role, collaboration is super, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, collaboration is important, but also kind of staying ahead of the curve is very important.
Yes,
Also,
yes.
being in the classroom now and being in front of students, what would you say are some of the trends that you're seeing in the field of instructional design? How do you try to stay ahead of those changing developments and make sure that what you're doing is always current and relevant?
So a major trend right now, and I don't know if you play like video games, Matt, but like virtual reality
Mhm.
is super important. So, always making sure that you're staying on top of those kind of trends, artificial intelligence, virtual reality. Um, it just immerses the learning environment and keeps the kids engaged. And you have to stay on top of these. And
Yeah.
sometimes it can be very overwhelming because so many things are being pushed out every year. But that's the job. That's how you get results. Like you have to stay up on like what the newest thing is as far as learning strategies.
Mhm.
Um, and also in order for me to stay up on the trends, I try to attend like professional development sessions, workshops, anything that's in my area, or I'm in a newsletter on a newsletter email list of a company that offers those type of trainings or those type of like just talking about the newest innovation, with learning technology. So, this continuous learning allows me to incorporate the latest trends in my lessons and
Yeah.
in my trainings. And sometimes they'll look at me like, Mrs. Lassiter, like, how do you know this? And I'll say, hey, don't question me. Just come
Yeah.
on, let's do the assignment. But it's super important in the world of instructional design, to stay up on that because it's a ever like technology is not going away.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you're staying on top of all those things.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up here, Tyrina, and you and I have done these a few times, and we've talked about interview prep in general. And one of the
Yep.
things that you and I both always say is be prepared to ask questions. As the interviewer, I do feel pride when I say, "Do you have any questions?" And they say, "No, you've answered everything throughout your explanation."
No,
Love to
can't do
hear it,
that. You gotta have
but
something.
I think the facet of the job. I mean, as much as I'd like to believe that to be the case. So
Yeah.
before we part here, go ahead and share some of the questions that you would encourage anyone who's going to go into that interview. Be prepared to ask these. Maybe they will check some of those off during the breakdown of what the job
Mhm.
description looks like. But what are some things that you usually encourage anyone that you're coaching to ask at the end of the interview?
Yeah. So let's just say you do have a really good interviewer and they've answered most or all of your questions that you have prepared. What you can do is kind of tailor your questions more so to like the company culture and things that they do. So you could ask something like, how are like learning and development or professional development sessions offered, with this company? Because any company that cares about their employees, they should care about, them progressing in their career. So I like to ask that often. And then just also too, how they feel about it. If it's something like it has to do with instructional design, just how they feel about the latest trends, technology that's out there. Maybe ask the interviewer what their favorite tool to use is.
Yeah.
Maybe ask them about their background. Like that's a great conversation starter.
Mhm.
And then always end with, if they have not shared it with you already, one, you can say, what's the next part of the hiring process? But even if you want to get a little deeper than that, and definitely let me know what your opinion of this is. Um, a lot of times when people get feedback, whether they got the job or not, it's not really detailed.
Yeah.
So what I tend to ask my clients to ask, if they're comfortable, is there anything in my background that would hinder me from moving forward in the process?
Mhm.
Because you've read their resume, you've now matched their experience with the resume with scenarios and stories. But I feel like by the end of the interview, you should at least have, something as far as, hey, yeah, they like you're definitely going to progress because you don't have, I don't see any red flags. I don't see anything that you fall short on.
Right.
So I've been telling my clients to ask that question just to see if they get feedback. They may still get a general answer, but at least you've asked,
Yeah.
So, I try to, kind of push the envelope a
Yeah.
little bit,
Yeah.
but not too much. Not
Right.
too much.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. Usually it's to me, it's framed of, was there anything on my resume that, I can clarify for you? Anything in terms of
Yes, yes.
previous
Hmm.
positions that I've held that I can do a little bit more or give you a little bit more background on? And I think that's a great
Yeah.
question to ask. Just because so there might be that, well, I saw you did this. Did it include doing this as well?
Yeah.
That's something that I want to highlight to the hiring manager. That's a perfect time for me to get that question as well. And of course, you and I have always talked about, what's important to you as the job seeker. So come prepared with
Exactly.
those questions as well. With myself working in packaging and our company having a sustainability initiative, I get a lot of questions about that because that's so important to a lot of people right now. So, if
Absolutely.
there's anything specifically that you want to know about that the company is or the interviewer themselves, how is this important to you as the interviewer? That's a fair question to ask, and probably not one that they're going to just offer up as free advice and insight. So that's an easy question to just kind of have in the back pocket too.
Hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Well, again, as always, Tyrina, thanks so much for taking some time to jump on here with me. I'm sure we'll do this again soon, whether that's a mock interview or a panel, but our paths will cross in the next couple of weeks here, I'm sure. But if you've watched, if you've listened, appreciate you taking the time to do that. If you have questions, if you're not already connected following Tyrina, make sure you're doing that. And I'm going to give you a chance here to plug all that in a minute. But, send us those questions there's anything else, or if there's other positions, in the industry that you'd like to see us do a mock interview on, let us know that as well. But Tyrina, I know you do a lot on social, so where can people find you, follow you? What do you have going on?
Absolutely. So my LinkedIn, Tyrina Lassiter. I'm sure Matt will, tag me in this on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram at Transition a Navigator. I do a lot of informative reels on there, and same name at Transition Navigator on TikTok as well. I'm a little more active on LinkedIn and Instagram. TikTok is a whole nother beast. So I'm still figuring out my strategy with TikTok.
Yeah.
But you can definitely follow me on any of those platforms. And if you're interested in just seeing, more about my services that I offer resume interview coaching. I also have a career transition program, especially for educators. I'm going to be pushing out a lot of information about that now that school is over for most of the U.S. So if you want to transition within the year, the program would be excellent for you. We have amazing results of people joining my program and exiting with a job. So if you want to find out any more information, you can just send me a message on any of those platforms.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks for jumping on here with me. Hope everyone who's watching, listening has a great week ahead, and we will see you next Monday.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Bye.